We want to take a moment to acknowledge there are a variety of people who could describe themselves as neurodivergent, and this can include a diverse list of conditions, disorders, etc.
And while our experiences may specifically relate to autism spectrum disorder, ASD, and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, we hope that all our listeners can feel welcome and relate to the shared experience of being neurodivergent in a neurotypical world, because this is our safe space.
Hey, Sister Squirrels! It's your favorite neurodivergent duo, Shy and Lex.
Welcome back to Black Girl, Brown Girl, Squirrel.
Hey, Squirrel!
Hey, Squirrel, hey.
It's going to take me a minute to get over that. Oh, so glad you could be here today with us. We are your host of Black Girl, Brown Girl, Squirrel, a podcast dedicated to Black and Brown women who are neurodivergent. I am your host, Shy.
And I'm Lex.
All right, there we go. So we are both neurodivergent women of color living with different aspects of neurodivergence. And we came together on this podcast so we can share this experience with all of you and you all can share it with us. Today, on this episode, we are going to talk about something that's quite interesting. So, on a Threads post I saw a while back, there was this whole discussion around what we as neurodivergent women or women who are neurodivergent, what do we call ourselves? So there was Neurospicy, Neurosparkly, there were Aspies, some people just called themselves impaired, some said they were disabled, some said they were accessible. So we decided we're going to talk about some of the titles that we have chosen to go by, the labels we have chosen to go by, and the ones we've chosen not to go by and why. And hopefully you will be able to decide for yourself what you would like to be called. Because as Audre Lorde said, basically, we define ourselves for ourselves, because if not, other people will do it for us, and then we'll be trapped into a mold. So we refuse to be trapped into a mold. But I just thought this would be a really great, interesting topic to talk about and maybe have a little lively discussion on.
Yes, because I do feel like we have very different viewpoints on this, for sure.
I think we do. But I'm always open to learning and understanding as well. So let's dive into the word neurospicy, because I did not know that there were some very serious feelings around the term neurospicy.
So first, tell me what you saw about the word online, because I have my own thoughts, but I'm curious as to what you saw when you were looking it up.
So when I first learned that I was neurodivergent and started getting into the community, they were just throwing around the phrase neurospicy. And I was like, okay, well, that's the way to kind of claim, that I am neurodivergent, but I still got some zazz and pizzazz and don't mess with me, So I kind of took it as that. And I did not realize until I read this particular thread that our Latinx sisters out there were offended by the term because they are always called spicy. And it's always used just like, there's certain phrases used towards Black women that to label them or to hypersexualize them or to, whatever the case may be, that is a term that is used to hypersexualize our Latina and Hispanic women. And I thought, wow, it did not occur to me that way because that is not something that was thrown at me. So then I felt some type of way about calling myself neurospicy. And then I stopped because I didn't want to be offensive to anybody.
Yeah. When you first mentioned to me about Latina women being a little bit offended by it for that reason, I was like, oh, I never even thought about that. But I can see that being a thing. Now, my thoughts on neurospicy, it is not even that deep. I just think it's corny. So I was never finna call myself that. I don't like it. I don't like it at all. I'm not into it. It's not for me. I'm definitely a person who uses like actual words for things. I'm not a neurospicy. I don't call people girly. I'm not a just all to me it feels all in that same realm. It is just it ain't me. So I was like, nope, nope, I don't like that one. So my
Wow.
feelings about it were so not anything academic or even anything real. I was just like, ooh, that's lame. I don't like that. So
You're like, that is so cringe. Never
it's
mind.
like, no, like for real. That's why I felt that way about it.
Wow. It's just it's funny how things because there were some out there that didn't care. And
Hmm.
it was just fascinating to read the thread because there were some that didn't care at all. There were others that felt very deeply about just being identified as neurodivergent. There were others that were like, why do we have to put a label on everything? You know, which I also understand too. And then there were others that were embracing, I'm going to embrace whatever label they chose to embrace and call themselves. Me personally, felt like I was like new to the community, even though I've been living in the community and didn't know it, but was new to the
Hmm.
community. And I thought the last thing that I want to do is use something that's offensive. The other thing that was really interesting to me was that there were several people that said, let's stop trying to put a cutesy label on everything.
Hmm. Hmm.
You
I don't
know,
like cutesy, so I get that for sure.
yeah, and because it's something serious, and when we cutesify it, so to speak, it kind of makes it a little less serious in some
Hmm.
people's eyes. So when you're like,
Hmm.
I'm neurosparkly, I get it. Black girl magic, sprinkle, sprinkle. But I also get where other people would be like, no. First of all, like you
Hmm.
said, that's corny. Or second of all, no, because this is something that needs to be taken more seriously. So I already know you don't like neural sparkly, so we're not going to even go there
Hmm.
with that. But what about other terms like Aspies? Because you've identified yourself as having Asperger's, so or what was
Yeah.
formerly known as Asperger's.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. So when I first brought this conversation up with my therapist and being like, "Oh, I was like, I'm pretty sure I have Asperger's." She was like, "Yeah, it would make sense." And then the next time we spoke, that's when she explained to me that some of the previous ways that autism was spoken about in a clinical setting, that Asperger's thing, none of that is what it is. It is now autism spectrum disorder, and you're in like tier one, two, and three, and those tiers are sort of revolving around the amount of support you need in order to like go about your daily life. So Asperger's has some complicated things around it. The one who was responsible for that name was into some eugenics and some other very hurtful things. That
Yes.
is why we're not using that no more. And I said, bet. Now, if you come across somebody who was diagnosed as on the autism spectrum years ago when Asperger's was still the used term, and they were given that particular diagnosis, they are probably going to keep saying it because
Hmm.
that is what they have known for little decades of their life. And
Hmm.
who am I to tell them to stop? Like that's not what we're doing. That's what you call yourself all this time. Keep rolling with it. That do not
Right.
matter to me. But I look at it as someone coming into and like identifying myself as someone with autism at this point in life when we already know this information about Asperger. Like I'm not touching that one. I'm not using that one. And there's also some talk about person first identification. So
Hmm. Hmm.
such and such is a person with autism as opposed
Yes.
to this person is autistic. I am a person who I do not care about either one. You
Okay.
will hear me say either one about myself. I will say I am autistic, I am on the spectrum, I am somebody with autism. I'll kind of use those interchangeably. That particular thing doesn't matter to me. I understand people's perspectives on it, being people first, as being like, I am not just my diagnosis, but I also, my feelings on it are the difference between saying I am a person with autism or I am autistic is like unhoused versus homeless. One of them is a little bit more acceptable to say now, but either way, this person ain't got no home. Like it's still like we're fixing a title, but we're not fixing the problem that they ain't got no home.
Thank you. Thank you.
No matter what way we're calling them, we still have a huge problem. This person does not have a stable shelter to go to every day.
Amen.
So whether I am a person with autism or autistic, either way, I can't read the room. So it's fine.
Oh Lord.
The general consensus seems to be that you listen to what the person wants to refer to themselves
Right.
as, and you go from there. And that's, I
Exactly.
think, a respectable way of going about it. So if I
Very
came
much
across
so.
someone who was like, I'd very much rather say a person with autism, I'd be like, cool, and that's how I would refer to them.
I agree. And I think that's kind of like the bottom line of everything is because I have also been around the deaf community
Mm,
and there are nuances there. And it's been many years since I've been there. So I'm very careful about what I say because I know terminology and what's been accepted has changed over the years. But having
mm-hmm,
been in that community at one point, learning the nuances within that, you go, okay, I get it. And it seems like in every community of some sort, because we're all part of different communities. So, like in the autoimmune, or I shouldn't just say autoimmune, but in the
mm,
invisible illness community, many of ourselves will call ourselves spoonies, and it's not
mm-hmm,
to be a derogatory term. It's a way of helping people understand I only have so much energy, so if I'm allotted 5 spoons in a day, I have to figure out how I'm going to use those 5 spoons wisely, right?
mm-hmm,
And that's something most people can relate to, so we'll call ourselves spoonies, so I feel like we should all be able to self-identify. Whether I call myself Black one day, African American another day, that is just going to depend. I might not call myself some of the names that were used in the past prior to that, but it's also because
mm-hmm,
during my lifetime, we in effect changed from going by Black to African American. Just like in my mother's day or my grandmother's day, and went from being Negro to colored to Black, right?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
So I figure people can identify the way that they choose. And yes, we should be respectful on how people choose to identify themselves. It's allows us to have ownership of something we have no control over, if that
mm-hmm,
makes sense.
mm-hmm,
We
mm-hmm,
have ownership of something. So oftentimes I will tell people I have ADHD.
mm-hmm,
It's
mm-hmm,
it's just another thing I add to my list of, yeah, I've got different things. This is another thing that I have. I never thought about it from the perspective of me saying I live with. I will tell people I live with ADHD because I do. But when I initially talk about it and I say, no, I have ADHD, I don't think
mm-hmm,
I've ever said I am ADHD. I will say I am neurodivergent.
mm-hmm,
I'm going to own
mm-hmm,
all of neurodivergence.
mm-hmm.
And then I'm going to speak for everybody.
I feel like saying I am ADHD, I don't even know if that's grammatically correct, and
I
that's
don't
probably
think
just a me
so.
thing.
Yeah, no, I thought about the same thing. As soon as I said it, I was like, and that may be why I don't say it that way. It's because it's more of a
Mm-hmm,
grammatical thing. I don't know. But I feel like we should all self identify. Now, the one thing that I struggled with at first, and I'm still learning to work through, is the whole disability component. Because
mm,
technically, if you were to go
mm-hmm,
fill out a job application right now and they ask you, do you identify as someone that falls under ADA, the Americans with Disability Act?
mm-hmm,
Most of us would probably say no. The reality is we do.
mm-hmm,
And when they list out, I didn't even know what my invisible illnesses are. It was listed in there. And I'm like, oh, I'm all up in this mug. So do I identify
mm-hmm,
or do I not? Because I also know there's ramifications if I identify. I also know there's some positives that could possibly happen if I identify. And maybe it's also ableist thinking. And that was the one thing I had to come to terms with and come to grips with.
that maybe you had some ableist thinking,
Hmm.
and that's why you were fighting against the idea of it being a disability.
Yep. And
Mm-hmm,
identifying as such. Because I felt like like how you told me in one of our episodes previously that, you felt like you had to earn, like, had I
mm-hmm,
earned the right to have this title? And so I felt the same way. Did I earn the right to be called disabled?
mm,
Do I need to be accommodated? And so that sparked a whole nother thought process for me of, do I need to be accommodated? Now, for my invisible illnesses, yeah, I do need to be accommodated sometimes. Sometimes I need to be able to nap when I need to nap. I've been diagnosed with ADHD. I've been diagnosed with PDA, which is pathological demand avoidance. And the other one is rejection sensitive dysphoria. That one isn't a full on diagnosis. She she basically was like, yeah, that's something else you might want to think about. I may not have it as severely, so to speak, as some other people. But so when you're thinking about all of those types of things, and I go, do I need to be accommodated for any of those
Mm.
things? And for my,
And can you be accommodated
or
for
can
those
I be?
things?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, for my ADHD, yeah, sometimes that means I'm probably going to have a note taker in the meeting. If we're, especially we're on Zoom, I'm probably going to have something recorded because I'm going to write something down, but I need to be able to go back and see it, hear it, replay it. I'm very, very specific when it comes to feedback. I do not believe in criticism because criticism is a critique. Feedback is the opportunity to present a situation and to present solutions. Criticism is just, here's the issues you need to work with. So when people say, what's that phrase? I don't even have it in my vocabulary ready already. Critical what is the word criticism?
Constructive criticism?
Thank you. Constructive criticism.
Because that was what I was going to ask you. Like, because I'll be honest, starting already with this feels like a lot of arguing about semantics.
Mm,
Feedback versus criticism, constructive criticism. The point of the matter is you are getting information about a thing that has happened that we would like for you to improve upon.
right. Criticism is, this is a problem and you need to fix it. Feedback is, this is a problem. Here's how I feel we both can work together to fix it.
Okay.
So
It
that's what
still
I
feels
mean.
like semantics to me, but I follow you.
Okay.
I'll follow you.
And so, and again, part of that is also because I look at things from a variety of lenses. So when I'm looking at it from my talent development lens and communication skills lens, yes, I'm definitely looking at semantics and terminology and that sort of a thing. And
Mm-hmm.
so, and that's the other part of this is like, is this all just semantics? Is it all, does it even matter that there is this terminology? But when you start talking about ADA compliance, when you start talking about accessibility and all of that, there are certain things we need to be accessible. I find now that I've much more focused on inclusion. It was actually something I started before I got diagnosed, but definitely
Mm-hmm.
afterwards, as far as I'm more aware of when I'm creating trainings, I'm very keenly aware the number of words that are on the page, which we're taught
Mm-hmm.
anyway when we're learning instructional design. But I'm paying attention to the number of words on the page. I'm paying more attention to the colors, the images, how the transitions are taking place. Is there too much animation? You know, all these different types of things that most people don't really think about. They want to do stuff because it's cool and it looks like this. And then I'm going, but I'm sitting there like right now, I'm dealing with a situation where I have vertigo. If I see an
Mm-hmm.
object moving, it's instantly going to draw my attention, one, because I have ADHD, and
Mm-hmm.
two, because my eyes are going to go there. And now it's really going to send my vertigo into a whole nother time and space. So those are the things that I pay attention to. And I'm like, so do we need accommodations? We may not all need those level of accommodations, but we might need some. So again,
Mm-hmm.
do I identify as ADA accessible needs or do I not? And I'm still working through that.
So it's interesting because, for one, it sounds like you're much more willing to accept that label of disabled with regards to your physical ailments,
Exactly.
physical disabilities. I mean, anything that's pertaining to what's happening in your brain, which you could argue is still physical because it's about synapses and all those things happening in your
Mm-hmm.
brain. But anything maybe people just refer to as mental, you're like, nah, I don't know about that. That's interesting to me. And I also think it's interesting that in recent years, I feel like that ADA little checklist survey that goes with job applications has had things added to it,
Yes, it has.
because like I'll work somewhere for a few years, and so I won't be applying for anything. And then when I start, I'm like, hold on, they got depression listed on here. Oh snap! I qualify to say disabled. And then I started seeing autism and things like that, and I was like, so here's the thing: whether this autism diagnosis is for real or not, they got depression in here, and I got the diagnosis for that. So I'm marking that one.
Yeah.
So with your hesitancy about completing something that says disabled, what sort of repercussions are you weary of?
So this is when we get into intersectionality, right?
Mm,
Because we know as women, we're generally behind the eight ball. As Black and brown women, we're even further. Now you're adding something else that in most people's eyes will put you further behind. I don't care if someone is physically disabled or not. I want to get to know you as a candidate and worry about all that later.
hmm Now, isn't it technically like that sort of thing goes to like that's not going to the hiring manager? That is going into data that's for the HR department. If I'm about to learn something new, if I'm finna learn the new conspiracy against disabled people at the workplace, please tell me. My
So
understanding is that that data goes to a different place that's confidential anyway.
technically, it is supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
I have not worked directly in HR in a long time, particularly in staffing in a number of years. But I
Mm-hmm.
will say this, there is always the possibility that someone will relay information that they should not be relaying. Don't get me wrong, I fill out for a variety of reasons. I will fill out that portion which was supposed to go to like the EEOC and all that kind of stuff. The purposes for which it was done for, there's reason to believe it's no longer being done for those reasons, and that people may not necessarily be using them for the reasons that they're supposed to be using them for in the proper way. It's just like when kids are in school, as soon as a
Mm-hmm.
kid gets labeled as something, that label stays with them, whether it should or should not, and whether it was a proper label or not. I'll give you an example.
Mm-hmm.
My husband, for years, used to get kids in his class. They would send kids to his class during the day. But I remember one year in particular, his entire class, except for three, were made up of boys.
Mm-hmm.
And most of them were identified or labeled as boys who were troublemakers or had learning issues or whatever the case may be.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, how do you have a whole classroom of boys and three girls? Like, where are the other kids? Who's teaching these other kids? And it turns out that even though some of them may have had things like ADHD, some of them just were being kids, but because
Mm-hmm.
somebody didn't want to deal with them, they got labeled. Other kids got, the ADHD label or they got something like that. And that's fine because then they should have accommodation. And for some of them, the accommodation was they needed to stand in order to do their work. They could not sit. Some need to stand and move by their desk. Some needed to
Mm-hmm.
kind of tap on the paper. Some needed to kind of hum, whatever it is. So he worked with them and then he told them, okay, you can do this, but this is how you can do this. So do your behavior, whether it's stimming, whatever it needs to be for you to get your work done and for you to pay attention. But here's how you can do it so it's not as, so it won't feel disruptive to other people. So it won't
Mm-hmm.
feel that you're tapping super loud, right? So my thing is that there's a time and a place for all of that, but I feel like we haven't come far enough in general as a society for us to be able to label ourselves the way that we would want to label and self-identify without some kind of pushback or some kind of repercussions. I'll be perfectly
Mm-hmm.
honest with you. I have applied for jobs where I have labeled myself and I've
Mm-hmm.
applied when I didn't label myself. Now, whether or not my getting a response back for the unlabeled ones was, I know I just didn't hear back when I did label myself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I haven't done enough to kind of put together some foolproof statistics on that. And it would
Mm-hmm.
be interesting to talk to someone that's in the HR community, and I may have a couple of
Mm-hmm.
folks in mind, but to really find that out because accommodation from a company perspective, in their minds, normally means money. How much money am I going to have to spend
Mm-hmm.
for this person? If you are depressed, am I going to have to kick out some money for your therapy as part of the EAP program? Is it going
Mm-hmm.
to cost me more when it comes to medical insurance and things like that? What their cost is or their expenses are going to be. Are you potentially going to be out of work because you're going to have to take a leave of absence, which I have had to do because I was
Mm-hmm.
in a serious depressive state. So I have a lot of questions around that. And so there's some hesitancy there. So that's why I say, yeah, there's also that ableist thinking to an extent, because all of that is ableist thinking, right? That's the society that I was assimilated to, that I now have to break down and remove out of my brain.
Mm. Yeah, that does make a lot of sense. I, a lot of times, I look at that stuff as I want you to know who I am so we ain't confused when I get there.
Boom, that
So,
part.
like, I see filling out this paperwork saying, yes, I am black and I am a woman and I do have these disabilities because if I choose not to identify, which is fine, and then I get to work and then I do need accommodations, how are you going to be treating me?
Right.
Was it going to be a net negative either way? Well, I might as well be upfront about it because if you don't want me here for those reasons, I don't want to work there.
True that.
It's the same reason of when I go to job interviews, I'm not going to straighten my hair because my hair not going to be straight when I get there. I'm not doing it. Now, I understand that I have a privilege to do that because we are in different times.
That is true.
And there are other things that help me out. You know, having a degree from a particular school, all these kinds of things are helpful. But when it comes down to it, if this is a place that's going to say, mm, we don't like the fact that this black girl came in here and she had a twist out or she had box braids, I'm not going to be comfortable working there. It's
That
going to
is
be
true too.
miserable for me.
Yes.
So I show up presenting myself in a way that makes it very clear what you are getting.
Hmm.
There's no false advertisement happening here. So I kind of look at filling out that paperwork in the same way. So yes, there might be negative repercussions to it. And again, this is my opinion. People do whatever it is that makes you feel comfortable. But I
Exactly.
fill it out honestly because I'm like, if you ain't gonna want me because of this, I don't need to be there. It's not gonna work out for me anyway. And I'm gonna be applying somewhere else because I'm gonna have so many other problems working in this place feeling miserable.
And I totally get all that, and I totally agree with you on all of
Hmm.
that. I think it's more of an individual thing. Just like it took me a long time to get to the point of I didn't go I didn't allow my hair to be in its natural state for many, many years.
Hmm.
From like 20 from 20 to like I was in my late 30s.
Hmm.
I always had I had a perm and stuff, and so then when it was like, okay, I'm going to go to my natural state, it took me a second. Even after I did it, it was like, whew, okay, I really did this,
Hmm.
because it's a whole process of embracing that, and it's a whole process of owning that all over again, right? And so, yes, there's slight generational things there too. So I admire
Hmm.
everything that you're saying, and I totally agree with everything you're saying. And I will tell any woman today, especially women that are younger than me, show up and be yourself and own it. There's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with who you are. They're either going to accept you or they're not. And that way you're not here where I am going, okay, well, there's partial ownership here, and I'm still working on ownership over here. And that also is rooted, that's why you go and do your work with the therapist and your trauma and work through all of that, so you can show up as your whole and complete and authentic self as you have the right to do. Because
Hmm.
when you don't do that, it can take years to undo and wipe out a lot of that, so that you can continue to show up as your authentic self. And I'm not applying for any jobs right now or anything like that, but I will tell you where it comes into play, because I do own my own
Hmm.
business. It does play into play when I'm like, okay, I mentally and physically do not have the wherewithal right now to complete this particular task for my client. Do I tell them this? That kind of a thing. Unfortunately, because of the work that I do, Depending on who my client is and what I'm doing for them, it may not even matter. They don't care. They just say, here's your deadline, get it to me by such and such a deadline, right? Where it shows up is if I come into a classroom to train and they notice something is a little bit off. So normally that's something physically about me. Normally I can mask my physical challenges pretty well because I'm one of those people. I'm like, when you turn the switch on and I'm doing my thing. And then when the switch is off, that's when you see the whole thing come crashing down. They say training is part 1/4 preparation, 3/4 theater. So I can go into theater mode real quick, right? But I just think that, again, there's part of that that's in my brain that's like, okay, you need to work through this and get over this. You need to stop thinking this way and stuff. I need to stop feeling that I accept it as an invisible illness, because there are times when, my rheumatoid arthritis kicks in and it is hard for me to get out of a car and to start walking. So I am grateful that
Mm.
my mom has a disabled placard and I can use her car and I can go park and walk a short distance. But on the other hand, I think about my high school classmate who was the victim of an attempted murder suicide, and
Mhm.
she is physically disabled in part of her body. So if you see one side of her, she looks quote unquote normal. If you see the other
Mhm.
side of her, she looks normal, but you'll notice there's something a little bit different. Well, because she doesn't have use of one of her arms as fully. And she has gotten cussed out by people because she's parked in handicap parking. First of all, I feel like that's nobody's business.
I'm about to say, mind your business.
Right? Mind the business that's paying you.
Ridiculous. Mhm.
And she has talked about how many times she is literally like, do you see the scar in my head? Do you see my arm? I was shot in my head. Does that count as, like, because that's the way her
Mhm.
petty game is set up. And also, too, she's tired of fighting that fight, right? So I'm going to make you
Mhm.
feel stupid for even questioning me. So then I go, but are there other people that need this space more than I do right now?
Mm.
So you start minimizing. And one thing that I appreciate that you remind me of from time to time, which I also tell a lot of other people, is what we're not going to do is minimize our experiences and our stories and our pain, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So when it comes to the whole label thing, that's something that I think individually we all have to work through and come to a consensus of for ourselves what we're comfortable with and whether or not what
Mhm.
we're comfortable identifying with. I do take pride in being neurodivergent. I do not have a problem telling people I'm neurodivergent. And I also do it because I want them to know, just in case I ask you something again for the fifth time, or I forget X, Y, and Z, or if I did not get back to you in such and such because I'm ignoring my timers and reminders that I have set, it might
Mhm.
be that I'm having a moment with my ADHD. And they go,
Mhm.
oh, okay, cool. Got it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That kind of a thing. But marking it on a paper that can determine so many things
Mhm.
outside of a medical, whatever. And even then, yeah, I'm still working on that.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. So, in a couple different ways, like using the label that makes sense for you, and also in the scenario where you feel comfortable using it.
Yes.
I think is what it kind of comes down to. Um, I think between just me, myself, and I, the way I discuss the label of autism is probably a little different than how I may speak about it with you, or with a new friend, or in like a professional setting, or
Mm-hmm.
in a medical setting. Medical settings are that is very, very interesting of a scenario that I think could be a whole episode about that, because there's so many things that you're working against in medical settings as
Yep.
somebody black that you almost are afraid to introduce this other thing because it might deter from what you're trying to
Yep.
accomplish. I think for me, I have often telling someone like, oh, I'm autistic, I'm on the autism spectrum, might be helpful to make someone understand the way I communicate. I speak very directly because I don't know how to beat around the bush. And if you do
Mm-hmm.
it with me, I don't understand what's going on. So, but speaking directly to people, everybody does not appreciate that.
Ooh.
Some people immediately feel like it is an attack. And I'm like, baby, calm down. I literally asked the question because I don't know the answer. But if you combine a direct communication style with being black, what you can get is that it is an angry black woman, which
Yep.
is like, I forget sometimes that's a thing that can come up. But if I tell people like, oh yeah, I'm autistic, so I'm very like direct and like I might just ask very poignant questions, but that's just because I'm trying to understand. By giving that information or offering up that label about myself, it automatically reframes how other people are viewing me.
Yes.
So in those ways, it's very helpful.
Yes.
And I also think with viewing something as a disability, there can be a middle ground where you're like, I ain't filling out this paperwork saying I'm disabled. But maybe you can acknowledge for yourself this is a disability to then reframe how you look at yourself. Sometimes the accommodations that you need to, particularly if we're talking about in a work setting, is not really something that the job needs to offer you. It might be, I know for me, I'm done with work. I need to like go sit in a dark room for a second. I might need to come home, get rid of all these clothes that are too tight and everything,
Yes.
and go just like turn off the lights and like lay on my back in the bed and just be quiet and dark to get rid of all of that too much sensory exposure
Yes.
that has been happening to me for 8 hours.
Yes.
You might not need a quiet room at work. You might need one at work, which is why you should tell your job that you have this particular disability. But if you don't need that at work, but you need that for yourself, looking at it from that perspective can help
Right.
you to remember and to accommodate yourself if needed.
And you know what you just said is so powerful, because even though we're talking about self-acceptance, right? So
Mm-hmm.
learning to accept ourselves and identify ourselves for ourselves. And part of what you're talking about there too is learning how to provide self-care for ourselves. So even if we don't feel like our jobs have to provide an accommodation like a standing desk or any of those other
Mm-hmm.
things, when we do take the time to work through all the emotions and all the everything that comes with a diagnosis, and then you go, okay, I'm in a position where I accept this. Now you're in a better position to care for yourself,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
And part of what I think we as women in general, and especially Black and brown women, what we don't do is a lot of self-care. We talk about rest, and I'm just going to go down here for just a second. There's a lot of talk about rest, defining rest. What does it mean? What does it look like and everything? And Dr. A helped me to understand rest in a way I hadn't even thought about. So, me, Lex, and two of our girlfriends go on a trip each year to a destination we absolutely love, just to rest, to not talk, not
Mm-hmm.
think nothing else, just to sit, relax. And if we get together and laugh and talk and fangirl out over stuff or whatever else, or eat Lex's delicious brownies while I make her fried chicken, then that's what it is. But we accept the fact that we are going there for all of us to just be. So
Mm-hmm.
Dr. A said, you know, we spend too much time as women identifying rest with like vacations and all of that kind of stuff. She goes, what do you do every day to have that same feeling every day? That same measure of rest, to get some of that same self care, even if it's just for 5 or 10 minutes. And what we're talking about is not necessarily like, I used to say, oh, well, my self care is, I do my skincare routine and I do. Those are some things that you're doing to take care of yourself, but it is not self care.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something we have yet to recognize as two separate things: taking care of yourself and self care. So self care could be reading a book. So you are detoxing, getting rid of whatever's in the day. Self care is coming home, snatching off that bra, like you said, and going into a dark room and just being like, whew.
Mm-hmm.
Self care is saying something along the lines of, you know what, I'm going to sit here and watch an episode of my favorite K drama right now, just because this is going to take me into another place and also make me feel good. So that is self care. Caring for yourself is making sure you don't eat a bunch of junk food because you're trying to eat your feelings,
Mm-hmm.
or having too much to drink because you're trying to drown out your feelings. And that's saying a lot for somebody that likes to have a drink. And so I'm saying it's things like that that's different, or doing destructive things like I'm going to go shopping. That's
Mm-hmm.
not caring for yourself, and that's not self-care. So we have to understand all of that. So it's the same thing when it comes to our self-acceptance, accepting the diagnosis that's come to us. That takes a little bit of time. For some of us, like you mentioned in your episode when you talked about how when you found out, it was relief. For me, it
Mm-hmm.
was numbness. It was like, okay, I've got to move through this and process this. For you, it was like, haha, this validates how I've been thinking and feeling all along, because you had a checklist in your head that said, I am doing boom, 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 boom. And all of that bottom line adds up to this.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going, well, I have this and I have this and I have that and I have that, and, and it could be this, this, or this because they all overlap, right? So we
Yeah.
all have to process in our own ways, but eventually we come to that self acceptance. And the reason why we started talking about these labels and everything is because if you want to call yourself a neurospicy, call yourself neurospicy. If you want to be neurosparkly, call yourself neurosparkly. If you want to be neurodivergent, call yourself neurodivergent. If you want to call yourself disabled or requiring accessibility, then do all of that. The only thing we're going to encourage you to do is to accept yourself and to accept your diagnosis. Take some time to do that. And if that means working through a therapist to get to that, then do that. You will
Mm-hmm.
feel so much stronger and so much more empowered when you do so. It's a whole different way of living and existing and feeling and being free when you say, this is who I am. Yeah, I think of I get asked sometimes, what would be your walk on song? Like if I were to do a keynote address, what would be my walk on song? And it's I'm Every Woman. If I'm going to pick a upbeat song, if I'm going to pick a little slower mellow song, it's The Pieces of Me by Lettucey. These are all the things that comprise who I am. And I often think of, when you think of a spectrum, right? I think of, when a light goes through a crystal and it comes out on the other side and it goes through the
Mm.
fractals and it creates all this beautiful light. And then it shimmers just like a diamond. It shimmers and it hits all these different, that's who we are. We are this beautiful diamond, and we have a light that is shining off of all different facets of who we are.
I have so many things to say. Number one,
Girl,
it takes a certain type of person to be asked that question. What would be your walkout song? No one's ever asked me that. That's not a
what
thing
would be
people are
your
asking.
walkout song?
I don't think I have one because I prefer to not be walking out.
Well,
Now,
okay, there's that.
now, also, the way that you just described us, there was so much art in the way you just described that. Did you do drama and theater in school?
Yep.
Theater people, you're all the same.
I did dance and I did dance in elementary, and then I did a little bit of theater in high school, and I did theater, a little bit of theater in college. It's always been a part of my
Yes,
life. I was either going to be an actress
yes.
or a teacher. I ended up being a teacher who likes to act.
Listen, it's just so, again, interesting when you just see how different you and your friends can be from each other. My brain wouldn't have done any of that you did. That felt like gymnastics, and my brain don't do none of that. But I love that for you that your brain did all of that and you had such beautiful things to say. I was just like, yeah, man. I mean, call yourself what you want and do what you want with it. Do your best.
But that's the beauty about communication, right? So
Hmm.
as someone who teaches people about how to communicate and behaviors and such, that's the beautiful thing, is because there's going to be somebody else that's going to be like, okay, that's a little bit too simple for me. I need to understand this better. So they're going to get this
Hmm.
bigger picture, and there's going to be people that's going to be like, okay, that was just way too much artistry for me. Give it to me straight. So
Yeah.
I'm the one that's your shades of gray. Lex is your black and white. That's how
Hmm.
you that's But
Hmm.
when we communicate like that, then what ends up happening, the reason why we compliment each other when we're having conversations with each other, is because you do compliment, you fill in those pieces.
Hmm.
That helps you. So when you're reading me or trying to read me or understand me, you know exactly where I'm
Hmm.
coming from. And the same with you. And I'm like, okay, Lex is going to give it to me straight. So that's why I know I can go to you and I can ask you certain things, and you just going to be like, it's like this.
Hmm. Hmm.
You're not going to dance it. You're not going to play it. Yeah. So that's what I love. And then if you like, you have come to me sometimes, you say, okay, help me to understand this. And I'm like, ooh, now I got to figure out how to explain it. Well, I can only explain it the way I understand it or the way I see it in my brain. And sometimes it makes
Mhm.
sense to you. And then when it doesn't, you're like, okay, I get this part, but you got to explain this part.
Mm.
That's what communication is about. So when we take the time to, in my opinion, when we take the time to decide who we are and who we want to be and figure out how to communicate that, that is a very freeing thing. It's a very freeing and empowering thing. Because once you
Mhm.
know who you are, there's so much power in knowing who you are. So much power in knowing who you are. There will be some that might be able to understand this better of if you have a name that is of a different language,
Mm.
like I do. My
Mhm.
government name is Shawishi. So it took me a long time. I used to have a lot of pride in my name, and then I went through a phase where I did not have an ounce of pride in my name because I was tired of people messing it up, this and that, and I allowed my name to be disrespected. Now realizing that my name was part of who I am, so therefore, every time my name was disrespected, I was disrespected, right? So when I reclaimed that and took ownership of that back, that was empowering and freeing. You will not disrespect my name. You will learn how to say my name, or we don't have to communicate because you're not showing me respect. So it's the same thing when we're talking about being neurodivergent. No matter where we are on the spectrum of neurodivergence, no matter what label that we have, once we learn to accept it and then we choose how we want to identify, we will not allow the disrespect. We won't allow ourselves to be treated or called any other way.
Mm.
And so that's when I go and say that's where my activist side comes in, so to speak, because I
Mhm.
advocate for myself. And I'm like, no, you're not going to talk to me and treat me any kind of way. Just like you said, this is who I am. No, they're going to know who I am from the start. So if there's an issue and they don't want me there, I don't need to be
Mhm.
there.
Mhm.
And that hair analogy, girl, we can come back to, whew, yeah. I wore braids to
It's a
work
whole thing.
one time in my entire career.
Mhm.
One time.
Mm.
And after being treated like a pet, never did it.
Oh, they was just touching it.
Yeah. So that's
Mm.
that's a story for another time. But
It most certainly is.
but this also goes back to, again, when we're a lot of us had to take time to identify the type of women we are, the type of women we want to be. We love to name and claim that we're Black, Latina, Hispanic, Korean, Laotian, whatever the case may be. And then there are times when people, depending on where you live, try to put you down for that. And you're trying to figure out, do I
Mhm.
claim it or not claim it?
Mhm.
Maybe you can pass as something else.
Mhm.
But
We
once
don't
you,
have that luxury, but yes.
yes, that's true. But once you identify it, like I said, and you identify it, and when you stand in your truth, whatever you decide your truth is going to be, and I hope it's the honest, authentic truth, but whatever you decide is going to be, when you stand in your truth, that is powerful. That is very powerful. And that means that you've also worked to overcome much of the things that would have held us back, that has been covertly pushed into our brains and our minds and to condition us on how to think and act. So
Mm-mm.
that's my thoughts on that. Well, that was interesting.
Yes, that was labels, you guys.
So, you know what? We would love to know your thoughts. What do you call yourself? Or have you even thought about it? How do you identify? You can just drop us a note. We would love to hear from you. You can go to our fan page at fanlist.com/BGBG squirrel. Again, fanlist.com/BGBG squirrel. Drop us a note, record us a message, let us know what your thoughts are. We'd love to hear from you, and maybe even include what you had to say in a future episode when we circle back and talk about these things. Yeah. Whew. Talk about exhausted. I'm good. I'm tired. I'm labeling myself as tired.
I is TIDE tired. That's what I feel.
Oh, that was a lot to unpack. And I'm sure at some point we'll come back and unpack some more of that. But thank you all for
Hmm.
being with us today. And yeah, we'll see you next week for the next episode.
Bye. Thanks for squirreling with us. Have questions? Want to share your experience or other feedback privately with us? You can email us at bgbgsquirrel@gmail.com. That's bgbgsquirrel@gmail.com.